welcome everyone. I'm here with Jesse Fields, who's a very great and dear friend of mine who
Oh
wrote
yeah.
this fabulous book entitled Receiving Love is an Inside Job. And
Oh
I just
yeah.
wanted to come on and just have a chat. We were experiencing technical difficulties, but we're back on. So I just want to chat briefly and pick your head. So first and foremost, congratulations, job well done. I'm very proud of you. Before, I already patronized before I even read the book, right? So, I mean, what can I say? It's a long time coming though, right?
Yes. Actually, I believe about 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
This is 20 years in the making because
Mm-hmm.
we used to walk
Mm-hmm.
up and down the streets of New Brunswick. And I don't even think you remember, there were one time you and we walked
Mm-hmm.
from New York Penn Station all the way down to the Twin Towers. I don't even think you remember that, but you're
Mm-hmm.
such a dear friend to me. I've seen the evolution of you. When I saw you on Rutgers campus, I was like, who is this earthy girl with the funky outfits and the hair everywhere? So you're a dear friend to me and to my family. So this is 20 years in the making. So
Right, and it's been a minute, so it's like we're talking about the book, but it's been a minute since. I mean, we talked, but it's been a long time since we actually met and just like chit chatted and just caught up. But
absolutely.
yeah, but I wanted to talk about this book, but I was a little hesitant to kind of discuss this, especially with the whole thing of Kevin Samuels dying.
Of course,
I'm
sure.
shocked still. Like I don't really care. Like I feel like Samuel really didn't have. Initially, he was making me upset, right? But then after a
Sure.
while, I literally removed him off my timeline.
Wow.
Literally,
Okay.
like so, it didn't bother me, but I still was kind of shocked that I feel like he died abruptly. But what is dying abruptly, right? Like nothing is promised to any of us, right?
Not at all. Not at all. Yeah. I mean, it's valid, right? I'm certain he ruffled some feathers, right? I think it's important. It's
Yeah.
not what we say, but it's how we say it,
Uh-huh.
right? So I don't think no one should condone speaking out of tone, especially to our women.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, I think the conversation is more than just him,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think he's really, it's kind of like the catalyst to have us as particularly people of the African diaspora to start talking again about relationships, because the problem is I see men over here and women over here, and we don't want to talk, right? We're just, this is what I believe, and the men are wrong, and the men are like, well, the women are wrong, but we're not coming together and having healthy conversation. So one thing I would say, we can disagree, but we should never be disagreeable,
But like so what I find, I don't even know why like we even are segueing into talking about Kevin Samuels, but one of my critique about him is that what are his credentials? Like there are a lot of people such as yourself, and
Sure.
before I finish, well, after I finish this, I would love for you just to introduce yourself, who come from clinical professional backgrounds, who are trained um, in the business of giving advice and therapy and consulting. That's what kind of, I mean, it's not to say that what he had to say may or may not have been valid, right?
Sure,
But when
sure.
you're dealing with something so gingerly or something so how can I say, so tender or delicate is the word. I would like to have my information, one, from someone who's in a successful marriage, number one,
Sure.
and then also someone with a clinical background. So I like an alliance of science and also an experience. And I mean, for someone who's been married twice, but then again, I think Kevin Samuels is a persona. But before we even dwell into that, because we're here to talk
Sure,
about
sure.
your book, please just briefly just tell us about your professional background.
Absolutely. Well, my name is Jesse. I'm a husband. I'm going on 16 years strong by God's grace. I'm a father of two awesome and amazing boys. They're probably literally downstairs in the refrigerator asking for snacks, right?
Right.
So I'm very much so, I love my wife, I love my family, but also, right, this book here, Receiving Love is an Inside Job. Honestly, Joa, this book is really an ode to my mother and my aunts, my aunties, so to speak. And I didn't know that right in the book, right? But ultimately, you know, I grew up and I saw some stuff, right? Maybe not so much healthy stuff. But I literally sat at my mother and my auntie's feet, and I learned so much about relationships, right? And you most certainly can be a good person, right? But the reality is, especially in relationships, two good people don't mean that you're good for each other, right? So it's not just enough for it to have a desire to have a healthy relationship. I really think it's important that we learn those key skills for a healthy relationship. And honestly, it all really starts with us, ourselves, right? You know, healing has to start from within. The reason why I titled the book, Receiving Love is an Inside Job, because honestly, it has to start from within, right? And I see it so often, especially from mothers, right? And I see it from women as well as men. But I think the beautiful thing about women is that women, I see bravery with women that sometimes in mass, most men may not openly express to have struggles with dating and relationships. Most men will say they'll present well, or I got it going on. But the reality is we're all struggling. We're all trying to figure this out. But the reality is I see with many women, I'm just being honest, is that most women are finding themselves loving others, but may not have the same love they have for themselves. And I say it all the time, and I say it in my book, you cannot pour from an empty cup, right? You cannot love others unless you're full, right? And honestly, when you love people, you should love people from a space of overflow. So in other words, you have to love yourself first, right? You have to honor yourself. You have to honor your no, right? Because I can imagine, have you ever said something or did something for someone, you said yes to someone, but you said in your heart no? Have you ever been there?
Oh yeah, plenty of times. I mean, yeah, I think that plenty of times. Right, right. But I feel like it's not received well.
Most certainly. But that's the thing. And that's the thing we learn in terms of clinical training. Myself, you know, having a bachelor's in psychology, a master's in counseling, working as a mental health clinician for almost 16 years, doing individual and group therapy. Through my clinical training and my personal learning, we learn that honestly, when it comes to, it's not so much, we are concerned about others, but we're more or less concerned what other people might think. But the reality is that most people don't really care, right? If you say no to people, if they're your friend or if they're your family member, they may be upset for the moment, but in the end, they're going to have to understand. We have to be firm in our no. And what I've noticed, unfortunately, with some women, let's use the word some, because I'm gonna put this on the table, because with Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, we got to drop this mess that all men are bad, all men are garbage, or all women are such. It's BS. It's really, really BS, and it's really clickbait, right? And I don't want to put no names out there, but we really got to stop this, right? Because you can't stop. Let's stop painting broad paint strokes, right? Because you're going to have healthy men as well as unhealthy guys. You're going to have unhealthy women as well as unhealthy women as well. So we got to stop this. At the end of the day, it's good people and not so good people. And they come in all shapes, sizes, and colors, as well as genders. But in the end, the reality is this. I say it all the time. It may not be your fault, but it's always your responsibility when it comes to your relationship. Yes, unfortunately, maybe someone has done you wrong. Yes, somebody may have cheated on you, but in the end, you have to take personal responsibility, because if you don't, how on earth is your situation ever going to get better?
So so before we got on, because we were having difficulty getting on, like,
Sure.
so I feel like there are other nuances though in terms of Black women and dating that are not necessarily like addressed. It's like an invisible hand, and one of them being like the availability of like available men who want to be married and who are financially secured and in the right place to do so. So let me ask you this. So on
Yes.
cover, it's a woman of color. Is ideally your cohorts or ideally the demographics of people you want to address? Is this a book primarily for Black women in mind? Or, I mean, a lot of the truths can be applied to anyone, but is
Sure.
this like the ideal person? Because you referenced your mother. So ideally, do you feel like this book is primarily addressing Black women?
Well, I think it's addressing relationships, is addressing women as a whole. But let's be honest, there are specific challenges that perhaps Black women are
Mhm.
more familiar with than other races, right? I hear where you're coming from. This idea that most Black women feel that there aren't the same amount of Black men who are,
Mhm.
quote unquote, maybe on their level or
Mhm.
maybe in their economic bracket or have the same level of
Uh-huh.
education. But this is the thing, and I'm so happy you brought that up,
Mhm.
right? Because me being a borderline brother growing up my whole entire life, I
Mhm.
wanted nothing more than to be in a healthy, loving relationship.
Mhm.
And I think women may not quite understand, but
Mhm.
there are scores of men who are unmarried, who happen not to be in a relationship,
Mhm.
who are desiring a healthy, loving relationship. And this is the thing, and for all the women out there, including yourself, you may not know this, but I'm certain there's been so many times where you've been in a coffee shop, where you've been in a bookstore, when you've been in a supermarket buying your low carb bread, that there was a guy checking for you,
Mhm.
but he wasn't quite sure how to approach you, right? He didn't know if you're upset trying to go to work or your shoes are a size too small with the
Mhm.
grimace on your face. But the
Right.
reality is, I really think women might feel that if I approach a guy, I'm coming on too strong, but
Mhm.
you don't necessarily have to hit on a man, right? But I think it's healthy to just be maybe open and say, what's up?
Okay.
I love that shirt you're wearing. You will be surprised because most men would think a woman such as yourself is already taken, right? So
Mhm.
I really feel most times the opportunities can be there,
Okay.
but sometimes we have to change our perspective and
Mhm.
maybe give an invite, so to speak, right? Because most men are scared to death. Most men are scared to death to approach
But
women like
but
you.
but
I'm being quite honest. Like
you
with my
couldn't tell
wife,
by this, but like you couldn't. So to me, it's like this whole red pill movement, or I don't know if I necessarily want to equate the manosphere to the red pill movement because I kind of feel like the red pill movement is dangerous. But why, like when I read I was hesitant to read the book, and I'll put this up here: Receiving Love is an Inside Job. Of course, I was going to read it by virtue of our friendship and me wanting to support you as an author, right? And clinician. But I feel like a lot of the self-help lately is
sure.
just geared toward Black women. Like, where are the groups and wellness books that are specifically speaking to some of the issues, a lot of the issues as it pertains to like Black men? So even with Kevin Samuel was really big on, we could go back and forth of what he stand and how he felt. But one thing and I've been blogging a lot about is the concept of, women who aren't married, dying single, and alone. And then I'm like, well, even me having a clinical background, statistically, a lot of men, honestly, whether you marry them or not, tend to die before women. And then also heart disease, like he went into cardiac arrest.
Mm,
Um, 56 is not a baby, but it's relatively young. But it's like
sure.
this whole fear factor of you dying alone, like marry us or you die alone. I'm like, we're marrying you and we're still dying alone because a lot of men, and specifically Black men, do not take care of themselves. And to
Yeah.
me, that was one of the lessons that I feel was lost in him dying. So, and then also just one other point, like I have cohorts of people who are colleagues who are of different backgrounds. And, I tell the story of how I had one colleague just basically describe how she met her spouse or potential spouse. And it wasn't like, oh, I went to the Himalayas and I did my mantras. It was just like, I went to a bridal shower. My sister-in-law introduced me to so-and-so. We had vodka. I was vomiting. He was holding my hair up and he looked in my eyes and I looked into his and I knew he was mine. It's not, sometimes I feel like with Black women, it's just like, you have to do the spiritual work. You have to do this sometimes.
Not at all. Not at all. I honestly, if we want to fast track this, and if I was to tell women what will stand your best chance of finding love, and if you're already in a relationship, what is your best chance of sustaining that love or harnessing that love to have a healthier relationship? I would say two things perhaps would be best for you to focus on. One is self-awareness, right? And in essence, self-awareness is the whole idea of being so keyed into yourself, right? You know, definitely you want to, you don't want to complete no one, and no one should ever attempt to complete you. It's not possible, right? But you want people to compliment you, sure. But in order for that to happen, you have to love yourself. You have to know what your boundaries are. You have to know your deal breakers, right? And I think what most women, what happens is they do want to love themselves. They aspire to love themselves, right? But the challenge is, how do you effectively communicate that to the men or man in your life? It's a big difference to love yourself, but it's quite another to be able to effectively communicate that to the dating pool of men you're dealing with, or your man. Because the reality is, we men, we respond to action. We respond to action, yes. And I tell women all the time, yeah, take his words, you know, hear where he's coming from. But if you can put him on mute, you know, and mute his words and just pay attention to what he does, like study how he acts, study how he maneuvers. Where is he going? Is he meeting out in the middle of the night? Are you seeing him on the weekend as well as the weekday? He's going to tell you everything you need to know about him if you simply study his actions. And most women perhaps are not really apt to do that. I would say self-awareness is one, but also your intuition. See, this is the thing. Your intuition does not like speed. And that's why so often in dating and relationships, especially when you first meet a guy, that guy is so in a hurry to move that relationship along. Let's keep it real, sometimes to the bedroom, because your intuition does not like speed. You have to slow that guy down and take your time with that man. Because I said it in my book, right? Most unhealthy men, they're only interested in the low-hanging fruit, right? They're only interested in the quick lay, if you will, right? So you take your time. You know who you are. You set firm boundaries, because the reality is healthy people attract healthy people, right? And if you work on yourself and you cultivate in yourself and you make sure you are healthy, don't mean you perfect, but you know your flaws, you know your character defects, you know where you need to work on, right? Then you will be in alignment with the men who you will want to meet. Right? So I think the world is women's oyster. Honestly, I truly want women to win. I mean, I grew up in a household full of women, you know, so I see the magic of women and I just like to be near it. And I really, I root for women. We have so much potential, and you guys have so much that we don't have. I mean, we got a little bit of intuition, but y'all got women's intuition.
But back to my question, where is the self-healing and retreats for the men? Like, because I almost feel like, okay, I'm doing the work, I'm loving myself, I'm doing the therapy. Where's the work on part of our male counterparts? I don't see. I see all the books, self-help is solely catered to women.
I would say this, me and my clinical work, I've seen women get together and they take the work to heart. They shine, they don't play, they are all about the transformation. In mass, on the other hand, when men get together collectively, it's more or less, well, I'll do it if you do it. I don't know how I would be seen,
Mhm.
right? I think men want transformation as well, but I think just transformation speaks to women so much easier, if you will. And I can just tell you from my personal experience, right?
Mhm.
I fell in love with healing. I initially, when I first graduated from high school, I had unresolved issues with my father,
Mhm.
right? And to be honest, I was sleeping for long days, and by
Mhm.
God's grace, it was my mother who marched me down for therapy, right? But the beauty in all of this, the very agency that I was seeking therapy in my young adult years actually became the very organization that I've been working for over 15 years
Oh,
as a
wow.
mental health clinician doing therapy. See,
Mhm.
but this is the thing. We have to understand that our trials can become our triumphs, right?
That's
But
true.
but
Mhm.
we have to be open to it. I wish I had the answer. I would say women are really willing to put their money where their mouth is. And it is seen as more profitable, right? Women, they spend more, right? Men barely like to even go to the store to buy clothes. And most often times, I'm just keeping it real. I'm just keeping it real. And when they do buy clothes, especially if they're married, their wife is with them. So, but
Mhm.
women, they to feel good, they will go to the store and buy a purse. They had a bad day. So women are not afraid to invest in terms of their healing and feeling good. So it's more profitable, to be quite honest with you. It's more
Mhm.
profitable. That's one answer, right?
I mean, I could, and I do say that the business of Black women, whether wherever end of the spectrum, is profitable.
Absolutely.
Um, so, but one of the things you discuss in your book, which I loved, is how you wrote where you have to be willing sometimes to lose a man to gain a man. So, can you elaborate more on that? I thought that was real powerful.
What?
I like,
What? Jay, listen, girl, two things
mhm,
can't occupy the same space at the same
mhm,
time.
mhm,
And the reality is, and it sounds, it's hard to say it. Sometimes women are in relationships that are simply unhealthy and toxic, right?
mhm,
I can see if you're dealing with a brother and he's trying and he's giving his best effort, and you can see him, you know, becoming more of the man you want, and he's
mhm.
doing the work, then that's something that maybe you can rock with. But if he's toxic and he don't want to change, right? You gotta let that brother go. You gotta create the space for that healthy man to come into play, right? So yeah. Sometimes we gotta make hard decisions, and I think oftentimes what some women may do,
Mhm.
they hold on because of the time that they have invested in the
Right.
relationship,
Uh-huh.
or we had good times in the past, or women might stay for the kids. But honestly, yeah, you could be in a relationship on paper, but if you're unhappy, fundamentally to your core unhappy, is it even a relationship? What's the
I mean,
saying? Yeah.
it really isn't. Like, I mean, as I read more into the book, I felt like this towards the end because I was apprehensive, like, oh God, here come the manosphere again. But towards the end, I was
But
like,
can I say something? Can I say
go
something?
ahead.
I'm gonna see, this is the thing. I would not classify myself as part of the manosphere
Think
or
so.
red pill.
Right.
There's so many layers to this, but I will go back with Kevin Samuels because of this. I think things caught fire with him when he was alive because I think finally men felt as if their voice was being heard, right? And I think a lot of men have become jaded with this idea that, you know, happy wife, happy life, so to speak, right? And I do feel that many men, perhaps their concerns have been placed on the back burner, especially Black men, because I don't see too many outlets that are expressing the narrative of Black men in a healthy way, right? I do consider myself to be a healthy Black man, right? But
Mhm.
the reality is that's not profitable. not in this age and time in which we're living in.
You said it's
Right?
not profitable?
No, not at all. Not at
But
all.
so going back, I posted footage, and I think it was Kingeries. Kingeries, I follow him. I love him to death. He is a queer Black male, and he's an advocate of Black women and colorism and all the nuances that
Sure.
go in dating. That sometimes I feel like it's an invisible hand that we don't discuss. It's just not like linear, right?
Sure.
And there's a video when I reposted of Kevin Samuels basically saying that when it isn't profitable to talk about what the men want to do, right? When he was talking and digging into brothers behind, he wasn't getting the likes until he started to kind of weaponize and go after Black women. So I almost feel like, to me, like Kevin Samuels was a persona, and he leveraged the toxic and hateful, the misogynoir that
Sure.
exists within the Black community against Black women. Because even when he talked about how I value men, a lot of what he equated being high value had to do with material. But
Yeah.
even those same values, like a woman saying she wants $100,000 man, right? What is wrong with that? If you're a woman who makes $100,000 a year,
Sure. Sure.
what's wrong with wanting a $100,000 man too? It doesn't mean that that's what I subscribe to, but if she feels like she needs to have that,
Mm-hmm.
then it became to where everything was based on superficiality, where your looks don't substantiate, even though I may have worked and put in the time. At the end of the day, how I look is the great equalizer. But long and short, most of those men, like the average income of, I think, Black men, specifically African American men, I was looking at the statistics, is about roughly about $60,000.
Yeah. Yeah. But this is the thing, right? Is that necessarily high value just because you make a whole lot of money, right? Just because one man says this is high value, is that truly what deems a man as being high value, right? Because he can have
Right,
all
right,
the
right.
money. Yeah, he can have all the money in the world, but if he doesn't have a good moral fiber in his body, and if he doesn't have high values, so to speak, and he has a if he's not faithful, right? What good is all that money? It makes no sense.
Well, I mean, but the thing is, it's like I felt as if like Kevin was gaslighting Black women. Like those
Sure.
are the descriptions that Kevin prescribed as equal high values, but most of his men, I almost feel like, were living vicariously through that standard, even though they didn't even meet the standard. I'm not saying that I need to have, but if a woman feels like she wants $100,000, why can't she have that? Like
No,
any other group of women do that. So why is it almost like a humbling of Black women when they give their preferences?
yeah. And again, with Kevin Samuels, is not what you say, it's how you say it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think any man should speak out of turn to a woman. If anything, better do have a good day and go about your business.
Right. But I feel like I think the first lady that made him go viral,
Sure.
it was like a deer caught in headlights. And then the women who called after, I'm like, yo, if you want to call up there and he just create a new butthole for you, excuse my, you deserve it. Like, who is he to validate? And that goes back to we have qualified people such as yourself who
Sure.
are in marriages, like 10-year plus sustaining marriages, and who are clinicians. Why is it that Black men or Black people like latch on to these personas, because Kevin Samuel is a persona, other
Yeah.
than going to get the help from people who are trained in the specialty? I mean, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts?
I mean, quite honest, I think the conversation is bigger than him. I'm happy that we're talking about it because we need to talk about it, right? One thing I would say, the internet, when it comes to Black men and Black women, we don't want to talk. We're on both sides of the other sides of the fence, but I would say the psychological residuals of slavery is real and it's alive and well, right? Especially for Black men and Black women. Although slavery on paper is over, many of us still collectively have this slave mentality where we simply do not trust one another, right? And we have many people online who are reaping the benefits of that. But we really have to start talking and having healthy conversations, right? The reality is, when you're in a relationship, there's going to be a give and take. And yes, you have your list of criteria as a woman of what you want in a guy, but you have to at least consider, what are some of the things that a man may want? And the reality is, most men that I know are rather quite simple, right? For example, this whole idea of rating women, I don't agree in rating women, but I think many women may not have kept in mind with some of the content creators when they ask, well, how do you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10? The reality is, in the eyes of God, you are a 10. The fact that you were created, you are indeed a 10. That's one thing. Let's get that clear, right? There's no one like you, will never be anyone like you. But when it comes to dating and relationships, there is such a thing called relational value. In essence, in terms of the dating market, how would you see yourself in terms of a number, so to speak, right? Because the reality is, you can say, I'm the best thing in the world. But if the dating market is saying, nah, sis, you got a little more work to do. Right? I'm just keeping it real. I'm just keeping it real. And it's like, you can't shove it down a guy's throat and say, no, I got it going on. And it's like, nah, like the last 7 dates say it ain't working. And if the last 7 men you done dealt with, they having similar issues with you, maybe it's time to maybe say, okay, maybe I got some work to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. See, this is the thing. There's nothing wrong in doing work. Actually, that shows strength, right? Being vulnerable is a strength. And that's for men. That's for men and women. And the women who's going to reap the spoils in dating and relationships are the ones who realize that doing work on yourself is absolutely healthy. I'm going to give you an example. You ever remember the show Being Mary Jane on BET?
Yeah. That was good.
Absolutely love this show. Absolutely love this show. And the reason I love this show so much because she was just as jacked up as most men, right? Like seriously. She had a lot of issues going on with family. She had a lot of issues going on in relationships. But the thing that, and I know this is fictitious, this is not real, it's the show. She eventually got to the point where she wanted in terms of relationships and getting married. And, fictional, in fiction, in a sense, I thought the reason why she actually got to the point where she wanted in her relationships is because of self-awareness, right? There was an episode when she was going to therapy. Ding, I'll say this. First of all, therapy is healthy. Therapy is sexy. Therapy is absolutely phenomenal.
It is.
Personally, I do therapy. It's amazing. But when you know yourself, oh my gosh, the world opens up to you, right?
It does. But sometimes it's like, I give myself as an example, like I felt like during the time you and I had, first met up in school, meeting all our friends and people we know, like I felt like it was an awakening, but and then after I felt like outside of that, when we went to college, I almost feel like it was like a mini universe almost, because we didn't have, this is before social media. Don't you remember when you would go home and you would feel like so out of the loop? Because we didn't have cell phones. There was no social media, Facebook. When you were on there, it was just whatever was going on in that world, in the outside world would be so different.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I almost feel like then you go out into the world and then it's like you keep just having horrible experiences, like, or maybe you meet blue collar. Okay, maybe this guy is not this, but he's a blue collar guy. But then, because a lot of Black women are basically now also exploring
Yeah.
people outside of partnerships outside of the Black community. We don't want to wait until we're 50 to get married, or why is always pain a precursor
Yeah.
for a relationship? And then the reason why I speak that, and now we're online, you know, like I have discussions with women from all Black women of all facets of life who
Sure.
are encountering the same types of issues with our men.
Absolutely.
So I'm like, I can personalize it and say it's just me, but I'm talking to this person, I'm talking to that. And I'm like, what is collectively happening with our men? We all can't be bad.
No,
And
no.
then
And
also, like, even some of the standards I feel like Black men have for women, if we were to subscribe to those, we would never date them.
yeah,
Like, you know, I hear men saying that you don't date women who have kids, but a lot of Black men, a lot of children are come from single family homes. Are those not your children? Or dating
no,
brothers who have incarceration histories,
yeah, yeah,
dating brothers who are don't get basically settled until late, you know, as compared to their other male cohorts.
yeah,
Or like, I feel like Black women kind of make allowances, but when we talk about loving ourselves, I kind of seeing Black women loving themselves to the point where men within their community are viable options. If loving myself or choosing better may actually mean that a lot of Black women may have to make an exodus out of the community.
yeah. And that's sad when you think of it, because as Black men, we are supposed to be there for our Black women. We're supposed to affirm our Black women. And I think I see on the internet what's going on right now is a lot of women have not been heard, and they have not been seen, and they're going to go where they can get that love, right? So I think collectively as Black men, we do have to do a better job and be there for our Black women. No ifs, ands, and buts about it, right? Um, how do we do that? That's another question, right? I think there's work on each Black man to do their part, but collectively as a whole, I think Black men do need to apologize for Black women, because collectively we have not done a great job as a whole. I mean, there's many Black men that are doing the darn thing,
Mm-hmm.
but honestly, the onus is us, because we are to be the heads of our house.
Mm-hmm.
And when the house is falling apart, it is the responsibility of the head to put things back together. That's just how it is.
Right, but some people almost feel like maybe our culture is matriarchal.
Mm,
Because it's like if Black women make the exodus out of the community, who's gonna be there really to hold the fort out of the community? Like, people come in halfway houses and stuff. So I mean, which leads me on to, because we could talk all day about this, about the subject of spirituality,
yes,
right?
absolutely,
So, I mean, you do talk about intimacy, right?
absolutely.
But the main thing actually is to receive the love that you actually desire, which in essence just basically means loving and appreciating yourself, right? I mean,
Definitely.
ultimately, right? You can't do that, but what does that look like? Because for me, I felt like, so I'm 41, I felt like I now know what it is to truly like love myself, almost to the point
Yeah.
where I'm like, I don't know if I may ever engage in a relationship or partnership.
Yes.
Um, I don't know, because it's like I'm still feel like I started a journey in getting to know like my true self.
Yeah.
But that's my journey. I know people were like, girl,
Yeah.
you
But
go over here with that.
and I think everybody's journey is different. I think sometimes, we tend to look at others and they say, well, this is how they got in a relationship, or this is how they got married. I really think for most women who are in sustainable relationships for the long term, the man that loves them, unconditionally, may not look like the man that they expected, right? Or the man in which they have envisioned. So most certainly, I think it's great for women to broaden their horizons, if you will. And
Okay.
sometimes when you're not looking for it, that's when you find it.
That's true. I always hear that, right? That is true.
So the thing is, you got to get comfortable with loving yourself. Like, take yourself out to dinner, take your behind to the movies, if you will, right? Get that big tub of popcorn, to go to the restaurant, do those things that fill you up, that makes you feel whole, that has you feeling good, right? And because I think like mine's going to vibe on a similar frequency, right? But I tell you, once you get keyed in terms of who you are, then the playing field really, really opens. For example,
I mean,
yes.
but Jesse, too, so much of girls are socialized from the time you are born to be a wife, to be a mother, to like girls are not also socialized in the way that boys are to just think about themselves first, right? So
Mhm.
it's like you almost have to do a re-education or like a detox, literally, right? Because
Definitely.
like for me, especially like me also, I was raised here in America, right? And there are remnants of African culture, but I have a direct contact with continental Africans by virtue of my parents, and it's like sacrilegious for you to be of a certain age, and because marriage and children are so instrumental to the culture, I don't feel like African American children are valued. So even when I hear men talking about, oh, I could never take care of a woman with a whole bunch of kids, as opposed where and don't get me wrong, things are changing too, but essentially, like children are looked upon as progenies.
Mm.
Children in like West African culture are looked as assets. Like the marriage breaks up, the father is very most like you always, of course, we're talking to most are still concerned about I'm taking my kids because though, but here like a woman with children almost seem like a burden.
Wow. 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 So there's cultural variances, right?
Huh?
But what I like to do in my clinical work
Mm-hmm.
and my private practice, if you will, firstly, the name of my company is Boundaries Are Sexy, right?
Okay. I
And
like,
the
and they are.
reality is, and most certainly they are. And I think that when women get keyed in terms of what their boundaries are
Mhm.
and how to effectively communicate their boundaries to the man in their life,
Mhm.
it's so much more effective. It's so more sustainable and attractive than any beautiful dress that you can put on, right? For example, your no means no. And the thing is, you don't have to add on to your no. But what happens, I find so many women, they don't honor their no. They simply do not honor their no. They want to say yes at the sacrifice of themselves. And when they do that, they operate out of alignment and they're unhappy and they're
Yeah.
disgruntled. And
Yeah.
you're not even helping anyone else because
Right.
you're
That's
not even
true.
happy. So if you say no and you feel no, you say it, you let that person know. They may not be excited, but they're going to respect you for it. See, this is the thing. This is why I believe most men rather, win in relationships because they honor their no.
Hmm.
Honestly, I think truly men win that way because they're socialized in terms of meeting their needs first, right?
Okay.
And the thing is, I don't necessarily think that's selfish, right? Because I think you have to take care of yourself first. Because thus the term receiving love is an inside job, because you
Right.
cannot meet others' needs before you meet your own.
That is true, but I feel like you're right. I think it needs to be a balance, right? Because if you are just concerned with only your welfare of your person and not the needs of other people, extreme case, right? I mean, being also working, I think that there's also a lot of mental health issues, and
Sure.
sometimes not to seem as extreme as, but the way boys are raised almost make them where they can have psychopathic tendencies, Whereas if they don't respond to the feelings of others and they have maladaptive behaviors, but the other opposite of that is that if always just being so concerned about the welfare of others and not yours, it just, I don't know what the clinical term for that. I don't want to say a people pleaser, but that is also destructive as well.
Yeah, so most certainly. So I think it's finding that balance, right? But how do we find that balance? And one way is definitely through therapy,
Okay.
right? It is definitely where therapy you learn how to love yourself and as well as how to play well with others, right?
Okay.
And most people do not know how to play well with others, right? So so definitely healing for sure. Therapy is super helpful, but I would absolutely say self-awareness.